Thank you very much, Odette. Out of the 30 years, more than 30 years as a diplomat, I've lived and worked 8 years in Israel, so this is also, as a homecoming, feels like a homecoming. I'm very happy to be here today, and we will see whether, when I arrived, thank you. When I arrived yesterday on this special day, a special day in Washington, we will see whether this date will mark a new paradigm, a new phase in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I mean it very much in a Berlin sense, in a dialectical sense, because it is, for better or worse, we don't know yet, that maybe we are entering a new phase. But this is not what I'm going to speak about today. I was asked basically to answer a question, the question, will we long for the outgoing decade? I think we live in times, and you will agree, in which we cannot allow ourselves to indulge in sentimental comparisons, nor can we afford to look back instead of looking forwards. Israel has always known and observed this. I'm not so sure about us Europeans, and yet I will try to look at the next decade from a European, very consciously, from a European and German point of view. In doing this, I will not dwell on the rise of China and, let's say, the usual think tank portfolio that is presented. Instead, I want to look at some actors who are, some of them grimly, determined to shape the world and this region in the 20s ahead of us. I will talk about Russia and Iran. I will certainly mention Turkey in that regard, and because it is a global perspective, also North Korea needs to be mentioned and included in this. Well, these countries, in very different ways, will be crucial actors in the 20s ahead of us. Let me start by making some remarks on what I suggest to call new power triangles. In the 75 years since World War II, world order has predominantly been shaped by great powers who disposed of high levels of A, economic clout, B, military projection, and C, the ability to forge alliances based on a convincing vision of international order. Let's call ABC the power triangle. In the decades to come, we will need to deal with very different geometries. World politics, and Middle Eastern politics in particular, will progressively be shaped by powers whose power triangles of economic clout, military projection, and their ability to build alliances will be less and less equilateral. Take the Russian case. At $1.4 trillion, its GDP equals roughly that of Spain. Militarily, however, Moscow is playing in the Champions League, investing almost 3.8% of GDP into cutting-edge military technology, such as Skyfall, Sarmat, Poseidon, and so forth. In Iran, the economic-military imbalance is even more pronounced. Let's assume that some mind-boggling 7.5% of the 2018-2019 GDP are earmarked for the military, while gas stations are running out of fuel. North Korea, of course, is the most extreme case. While the average North Korean cannot afford to buy toothpaste, the Kim regime devotes an estimated 25% of GDP to its nuclear program, alone to play along in the big strategic game. Even though the figures seem to tell a different story, with Turkey's relatively annual modest military budget of under $20 billion, Ankara projects enormous military power in the region and does not shy away from the breathtaking confrontations we've seen in Syria and Libya over the past month. So these players do not dispose of the seemingly unlimited economic means that enabled the United States to shape world politics for a century. They certainly do not embody a concept of international order that is attractive enough to build strong and lasting alliances. And yet, they punch way above their weight, leveraging their influence by boasting at all cost a military projection that is geared towards self-interest, disruption, and confrontation. By the way, given the almost unconditional determination of these players, take out Turkey, to subordinate everything else to their military might, Western efforts to change their behavior by imposing sanctions may continue to yield no results for a long time. Dealing with these powers is going to be even more complex given that there are other players on the field whose power triangles, economy, military, and order have yet new and different shapes. Just think of China in that regard. One thing seems obvious: we should not follow the course that Washington has chosen in recent years. Although the United States continue to be a global powerhouse both economically and militarily, its star as a forger of alliances is swiftly waning. Washington is drastically limiting its ability to shape order in the Middle East and far beyond, and I say this with a high degree of certainty even after yesterday's event in Washington. The US has embarked on a new course in turning its back on the world under the America First lemma, in resigning as a helmsman of international order by withdrawing troops from Afghanistan and risking to do the same in Iraq, and by not even trying to shape the future of Libya. Let us face it, the American vision of international order has not faded, and yet there is a massive dint in the American power triangle. This is, in conclusion, where my argument about Europe comes in. It may come as a surprise, but Europe is the only actor left on stage whose power triangle is big and balanced enough to make it a source of sustainable order in its increasingly unstable neighborhood. A, the European Union is an economic champion with a GDP of 16 billion US dollars. B, it is not a military machine, and we should not strive to turn it into one, but don't underestimate that combined military spending in the European Union amounted to more than 200 billion US dollars in 2018, 5 times that of Russia, but very ineffectively invested. And most importantly, C, as of today, Europe is probably the most credible and relevant proponent of global as well as regional systems of cooperation based on balance of interest, compromise, and even integration among states, as well as the concept of indivisible security. Europe is projecting the power that emanates from this specific triangle. I give a few examples. By freezing the conflict over eastern Ukraine in the context of circumspect neighborhood policy, by stabilizing the Western Balkans by means of strategic enlargement policy, by dealing with Iran's nuclear program, yes, by dealing with Iran's nuclear program, by filling the enormous security gap that has opened in the Sahel region, and by taking a diplomatic initiative on Libya, as we have endeavored at this month's Berlin summit. Don't worry, as a German, I'm self-critical enough not to to overlook the shortcomings of the European project. Here, among hard-nosed Israeli realists, they are obvious enough. However, these shortcomings should not make us overlook the enormous potential of a powerful European foreign policy. Turning this potential into a reality will be the European project of the next decade. We are forging ahead on this path with determination, and Germany will hold the presidency of the European Union in the second half of this year. Together with France, we are strengthening the European pillar in NATO with its own European defense identity. We are developing new mechanisms to boost European diplomacy, including a European Security Council. And we are taking established tools, including neighborhood policy, to a different level when it comes to North Africa, making it a very powerful policy tool for stability and security. Syria may come as a case in point. Yes, those powers I've spoken about and their military actions are shaping Syria's fate. But do we really believe that they will have the vision and means to establish lasting order for Syria and the region? I'm convinced no. They are very well aware that a lasting peace cannot be hammered out with European economic clout, military projection, and convening power. And they are right. Europe can offer what no other player in the region disposes of, the power of a balanced triangle amidst a complicated geometry of lopsided ones. Thank you very much.